Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for being flexible and accommodating us. We had to change our venue from in-person to streaming, but we appreciate all of you joining us tonight. Couple announcements. This weekend, we have a public night at our observatory at 7:30 p.m. In 2 weeks, on January 18th, is our astronomy fundamentals, and it will be on all sky cameras. January 22nd is another public night at our observatory at 7:30 p.m. and January 29th is a members only night at our observatory at 7:30 p.m. If you have any questions tonight, you can ask them as a comment on this Facebook video, or if you're watching through our website, you can email questions@naperastro.org. That will go to Chris, and Chris will get those questions over to Jeff to answer. Tonight, our speaker is Jeffrey Hunt. He's going to be talking to us about the planets in 2022. Jeff is the former director of the Waubonsie Valley High School Planetarium. So Jeff, thank you very much. Chris, if you want to flip it over to Jeff. Jeff, if you want to share your screen.
Good evening. Very pleased to be with you this evening, to be talking about the planets this year. I'm going to be talking about their relative positions in the sky, not necessarily how to the orientation of Saturn's rings or when you might see Jupiter occult its inner moons, but rather some interesting positions and places of the planets during the calendar year. And I want to start off here with the evening sky. This initial slide is from last year's conjunction, a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and the night before or so of their closest approach. And of course, it was cloudy here on that particular evening. This is the website where I write, whenthecurveslineup.com. And there's a link on there as how I got the name for this, the history behind that. But I try to put something there for almost every day's activity or a sequence of days together, so that people who are interested in taking a look what's in the backyard, if you want to share it with a neighbor, what's visible. So mainly naked eye or binocular kind of views is what we're looking at. I want to start with the evening sky, and I want to start with this particular chart, because this particular chart, the way that I construct it, the way that I look at each year is I construct a chart that looks much like this. And what it is a chart that is just simply along the bottom here, we have the sunset time. It's really not a time, it's just sunset. And as you well know, it varies during the year. And on the vertical axis, we have hours after sunset. So this ranges from sunset up until 5 hours after sunset. And events that generally happen in the western sky are then charted on there. In particular, the 5 bright planets, the bright stars that are near the ecliptic, and the moon. The moon is designated by these circles that happen to be there on the chart. That is the relative setting time of those. So we are looking at the evening sky, and we are looking at hours after sunset when these objects set. Along with sunset and the hours after sunset, we have the various phases of twilight. When the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon, civil twilight when it's 12 degrees and when it's 18 degrees. And notice that these times vary depending upon the year as well. So where you might see something easily in twilight, say this time of year, at 45 minutes after sunset. You won't see them in the middle of summer after 45 minutes, because twilight is quite long in summer. It goes over 2 hours long. So we have these various things, such as the yellow line represents Jupiter and its setting time. So notice that here in February, it starts to set about a month from now, starts to set at the end of evening twilight. Then it starts to set at nautical twilight. Then it sets at civil twilight. Then it sets at sunset, going back behind the sun. So that's what all of these objects are doing, such as Pollux or Spica or Saturn. And each one of these circles represents the time of moonset. Also, you see Mercury. You see Mercury bobbing into the evening sky in 2022 4 times in the evening. And notice that some of these are pretty good appearances and some of them aren't. Out here in the summertime, we have Mercury setting way before nautical twilight. Its apparition is not so hot, but we get one in August and it sets at the end of evening twilight. So it's going to be there during nautical twilight about that time and easily seen. Notice then we have these circles, and these are the planets when they are rising. So most of this stuff is occurring in the western sky. And we then go back and we say, well, when does Saturn rise in the east? When does Jupiter rise in the east? And when does Mars rise in the east? So when do these things come into the evening sky? And notice when a planet, one of these planets, rises at sunset, that planet is at opposition with the sun and then in the sky all night long. So notice that these two of these planets, Jupiter and Saturn, generally track along with the western migration of the stars, where the stars are moving across the sky and they're slightly different, about 4 minutes each day, whereas Mars is a little bit different from that. And certainly Mercury and Venus as it comes into the evening sky at the end of this calendar year. Notice that we have also marked interesting groupings, such as the moon in Aldebaran, the moon in Gemini. In other words, this is when they are close together. Generally, when one curve crosses another with these planets, this is when you can have a conjunction. And we'll be talking a little bit about those as well, in particular here in the morning sky coming up. I'm starting with the evening because it's pretty uncomplicated compared to what's going to be going on in the morning. And let's just highlight a couple of these things that are happening here in the evening sky during this year. Again, I'm not looking at the tilt of the rings of Saturn or anything like that. I'm looking at where they are. Now we are losing Venus. I think Venus is over here behind our set of images on the right. This was last night. Last night about 5 o'clock, we had a nice clear evening. The crescent moon was out there in Mercury, and Venus is very close to being disappearing now from our evening sky, not being present. And we can see that back over here on the chart. This green line represents Venus, and it is slow. It's diving into the horizon. About 5 or 6 minutes each night, 7 minutes each night, it's setting earlier and earlier and earlier. And within a week, it's going to be gone and heading into the morning sky. So we're going to have in roughly a week, less than a week now, 5 days, 5 evenings, we're going to have Venus in between the Earth and the Sun. We're going to have this inferior conjunction. On these charts, typically what I do is I mark this red line usually runs between the Earth and the Sun to designate morning sky from evening sky, and noon, when this line is lined up here and the sun's in the south, that's noon, and the opposite direction is midnight. And so on this side of the line is the morning sky, and this side of the sky is the evening sky, this side of the chart. So we're going to inferior conjunction here relatively soon. I clipped out a piece of the chart to point out a couple of items here on what's coming up on January 12th. On January 12th, low out here in the southwest, we're going to have a quasi-conjunction, as Jean Meese describes it, as when two planets get together, but they don't have a conjunction, meaning they don't have the same right ascension or they don't have the same ecliptic longitude, they get close together, and then Mercury is going to move apart. It's about 3.4 degrees, and notice I have it here on the chart in the clip on the left, whereas these two planets are going to be close together, a quasi-conjunction about 3.4 degrees. Mercury does not pass Saturn, but kind of inches up in there and then recedes back into the sun. Well, on February 2nd, we have a month from now, we have a nice crescent moon along with Jupiter out there in the western sky. These are worthy of photographs of getting Earthshine, that night portion where the sunlight is reflected from the Earth and illuminates the night portion. So it's labeled on the chart here as this moon. Notice the moon's really close to Jupiter in setting time that night. This is not always the case. To try to look at these charts and see, well, moon's beside, this moon setting is beside the Saturn setting, doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to be close together. It means that they set at the same time. So Jupiter and the moon are going to be close together in just a month. Beginning in April, we have the ecliptic really tilted highly compared to the horizon. And we're going to have a nice Mercury Pleiades grouping after sunset, only 1.3 degrees on this evening. And it should be dark enough by 45 minutes after sunset, where this is the best evening apparition for Mercury, where it's going to pop up there and be near the Pleiades, kind of near the Hyades as that occurs. If you look back to the left, you will notice here that the moon comes into play as well. A few nights later, the moon pops up here and is in this scene as it moves eastward along the ecliptic. So in a couple evenings after this one, we'll have the moon near Antares. We'll have it near the horns of Taurus, and then up near Pollux. So here's May 2nd. 45 minutes after sunset. Mercury's still there. It has passed by the Pleiades at that point, and then past the horns of Taurus. And then on the 6th of May, it'll move up there near Castor and Pollux. So the ecliptic is at a very, very sharp angle at this time of the year in May. And we get a great apparition of Mercury popping up there in the evening sky. And if you've seen some of these April and May apparitions when the moon's out there, and sometimes when Venus is there and Mercury, it's a very easy thing to spot compared to some of these apparitions where it's in bright twilight or it's quite low in the sky behind the trees or the neighbors' houses or whatever the case might be. Moving on into the year, in the evening sky we still are. We have a very close conjunction of the moon and Antares on September 30th. Out there in the evening skies, Antares is pretty far from the ecliptic, comparatively speaking. It's around 5 or 6 degrees south of the ecliptic, and to have the moon come through there is quite a sight. It's normally high above Antares when it comes through, but on September 30th, it's only going to be 1.8 degrees. I should also note that these moons are much larger. They're much larger than they are. I get these screenshots from Starry Night, and the moon is greatly enlarged in them. So it's clearly not that close to Antares, but it's 1.8, 3+ moon diameters away from the star. So it will be a nice look to the southwest. And I use typically 45 minutes as my time. Some interesting effects coming here with the planets at their oppositions. If we look back to the chart, we have this kind of crummy opposition or appearance of Mercury in the summertime in the evening. The GE means greatest elongation. The greatest elongation date is there. And Saturn reaches its opposition with the Sun on the 14th of August, and Jupiter on September 26th. So they're getting farther and farther apart in the sky, and so their opposition dates are becoming later and later. So we get the oppositions of these two planets when they're rising at sunset in the sky all night long. Notice then we get Mercury leaving the morning sky, going to its superior conjunction. We'll get to the morning sky momentarily. So it's on the other side of the sun from Earth. It's at its superior conjunction as opposed to its inferior conjunction that's coming up next week. I guess I got these two labeled incorrectly, Earth and Venus with the names anyway here, but Earth and Venus are on opposite sides of the sun. And then Venus begins to move into the morning sky. This is on October 22nd. Here's an interesting effect I've been looking at recently that is kind of interesting, and that is we typically talk about oppositions of planets with the sun, but the opposition of a planet with a planet is pretty interesting in what it does. So we're back to our chart here. November 30th, we have an opposition of Venus and Mars. So what this means is, in this particular case, is we have our red line dividing day from night because the line goes from the Earth to the sun. We have Venus and we have Mars. And notice that the yellow line goes through Earth, goes through Mars, through Earth, and through Venus. Meaning from Earth, Venus and Mars are 180 degrees apart. So as one of these sets, the other rises. And so notice we have this occurring over here. We have Venus setting, and Mars rising. So after November 30th, you're going to start to see Mars on one side of the sky and Venus on the other. And it will get better and better and better as time goes on, because you can see here that Venus is setting later and later and later, and Mars is in the sky as well at the same time in the east. And so we have this planet to planet opposition. In this particular case, when Venus is moving faster and it will move inside the 180 degree mark, beginning to overtake us again. And so we'll see Venus and Mars together. So they're on this date, they are separated by 180 degrees. Therefore, they begin to appear together. Now, there's some opposite effects that occur too, and that can occur with Venus when it's on the other side of the sun in the morning, on the morning side. So we have Venus and Mars beginning to appear together in the sky. And also we have Jupiter and Saturn in the sky there too, beginning at the end of November. So we have 4 planets, which I don't show on here because of the scale of the drawing. So we have Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in the sky at the same time. Meanwhile, we're coming up on this opposition of Mars. The opposition of Mars occurs in Taurus, and showing Mars from the 1st of August all the way through to the very left side, April of 2023. Notice, of course, it's moving to the left, and that's east when we're facing Taurus. And we have a couple of dates here when it goes past the Pleiades and when it goes past some of these stars like Gamma Tauri and Epsilon Tauri and Aldebaran. And so this is going to be quite a sight of a bright planet. And this is always interesting. We have these bright planets right now, Jupiter and Saturn, down there in the nothingness, so to speak, where we live here, of not very bright stars. Can't see them very well unless you take a time exposure of them or use a binocular for the most part. There are a few second magnitude stars in there, but most of them are quite dim. And when we get up here to Taurus and have Venus and Mars and those other bright planets moving through, it's a pretty spectacular sight. And you choose your own favorite star in Taurus and decide when you want to take a look and see when it's coming through. But generally, starting around August this year in the evening, it'll come up there in the evening, but it'll be largely out there in the morning too, when it comes up to passes the Pleiades and passes the Hyades and passes Aldebaran and goes between the horns of the bull. Notice the dates I have on the lower left, when Mars goes between the horns of the bull as it stops moving eastward, begins to retrograde and backs up. So it goes between those two stars, Elnath, Beta Tauri and Zeta Tauri, the southern horn, on those dates there that are listed. It goes through its opposition. It stops retrograding next year, and then starts moving forward again back through the horns of the bull and on into Gemini. So the opposition of Mars is not going to be the greatest in the sense of its proximity. It's approaching its farthest opposition point, and so it's not going to be as good, as bright. The seeing is going to be smaller, of course, but it's going to be higher in the sky, and certainly worthy of some public star parties next fall and so on, with seeing Mars move through Taurus, or encouraging folks to get out and to take a look at that. So this is the opposition of Mars in roughest terms. I'm working on a chart, or beginning to work on a chart that will provide some more details of this. This is my first rough cut of what this opposition looks like, in the sense of where to find it, where it's going to be, and the interesting effect of it going between the horns 3 times in the next year. So back here then to this late in the year. So once Mars is up there in Taurus, on December 24th, we have this interesting effect here of a nice elongation of Mercury. We have a crescent moon, and Venus is coming back in the sky, and happens to be Saturn is there. And notice on the chart here, I have, look for 5 planets from about the 24th to about the 28th. So next winter, we're going to have the planets in the west. We're going to have Saturn, we're going to have Jupiter, and looking back to the east, we're going to have Mars there near Aldebaran, about 45 minutes after sunset. So it's going to be relatively easy to spot, but the moon, Mercury, and Venus will be sort of low there in the sky in the southwest, but otherwise pretty easily seen, these 5 planets. So this is going to be the second time in 2022 that 5 planets are going to be visible at once. And I'll share something here with you momentarily in regard to this. So I've named a couple of stars here as well. So this is the evening sky in 2022, relatively calm. But if we now roll into the morning chart, you can see why I started with that evening chart, because of all of the things that are going to be going on in the morning time with this apparition of Venus that's occurring. Mars is already there in the morning sky. So now this chart is looking sort of facing eastward, and we have sunrise now at the bottom. We have the 3 phases of morning twilight, and the times on the left are hours before sunrise. The green line indicates the rising time interval of Venus. So by taking the time that Venus rises, subtracting from it sunrise, this is how this curve is created. So it's just a simple subtraction, but it's of time, and it gets a little strange when it goes back before midnight. But this is the curve that's created. We typically don't see Venus there, but these other planets, when they're up here near the top, they do some interesting things with the calculations, because here in May, June, July, this is occurring around midnight. The midnight hour is 5 hours before sunrise, even with daylight time. So we have these curves now. We have Mars, if we look at the very start of the year, January 1st, Mars is already in the sky. It's already rising 2 hours before sunrise. And down here, we see Venus very, very rapidly come up. It's rising sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner before sunrise. And it reaches then its greatest brightness. I use the term greatest brightness as an interval of time, not necessarily of what's called the greatest illuminated extent, which is the greatest brilliance. I use a period of time from the Naval Observatory where they just measure to the 10th of a magnitude, and there's about a week period there where it's about the same magnitude to a tenth of a magnitude, and the GB, the greatest brightness, is the middle of that interval of time. It's not quite the 14th the time that I figured to be the greatest illuminated extent. And then notice it starts to rise sooner and sooner. And over here, it's rising at about the time of astronomical twilight in early April. And from that time on until the end of the apparition, it is rising after twilight begins. So we have this great time here of the greatest brightness. It's incredibly bright in the sky, negative 4.9 magnitude. We reach the greatest elongation. And so then we have Mars. Mars is just kind of hanging out there right now in the same place. It's only moving about a half degree each day eastward, and it kind of hangs out there about the same altitude. And then it suddenly takes off and goes past these other two planets, which we'll talk about here, and goes later and starts rising before 5 hours before sunrise. So if we start looking at some of these things that's occurring here, we have this effect. We also have an apparition at the end of the month of Mercury coming into the morning sky. And so we have 3 apparitions of Mercury, the best one occurring in the autumn. Autumn mornings and spring evenings are the best times to see Mercury because of the tilt of the ecliptic. Spring evenings, autumn mornings. And so if we just go back over here and begin to look at some of these, there's just too many here to go through in a lot of detail in this time that we have this hour of presentation today. A couple of items I'm not going to talk about or show you is Mars passes by the top of the teapot on February 2nd. Is one that I'm not going to talk much about. And some of these things here of the groupings of Lune and Saturn, like for example, on May 22nd, notice these planets are bunched up there. They're rising at about the same time. And when the Venus line crosses the Mars line, there's a possibility of having a conjunction there, which I show as white boxes, these conjunctions. And it doesn't necessarily occur exactly when they cross. That's the key about this. You have to look specifically then at the longitudes of the planets to see when the actual conjunction occurs. I use ecliptic longitude in my estimations of these dates of when they're going to occur. So let's just take a look at what's happening here. So after the inferior conjunction, you can probably spot this as early as the 12th or 13th of January if you're looking carefully over in the southeastern part of the sky early enough. If you have a good clear horizon, I can tell you I find a good clear horizon at the Springbrook Forest Preserve at the parking lot right there on Plainfield Naperville Road. There's a really good southeastern look there, kind of valleys down. It goes downhill there. I've spotted Sirius there a couple of times for its heliacal rising. It's a good place to see things in that direction in the morning or in the evening if you want to catch some things coming up in the sky. So we have March 21st. They're relatively far apart. It's after the Mars-Antares conjunction, which occurred in December last month. February 16th, Mars, interestingly enough, Mars is moving faster than Venus at this time, and Mars goes past Venus. The conjunction is very wide. It's 6.2 degrees there in the morning. How can Mars go faster? Well, Venus is retrograding as it comes out of inferior conjunction. It is retrograding. It's going westward into the morning sky, and it stops as it kind of rounds the corner there, rounding its orbit. It kind of stops and heads back east again. And as it slows down, it stops moving westward and slowly starts to pick up speed. Mars, just plodding along at a half degree per day, goes past Venus. And so this February 16th date is the second conjunction of a triple conjunction that began last July. Last July, Venus went past Mars before Mars conjunction with the sun. And so this now, in this series, on February 16th is the second conjunction of 3. And then Venus picks up speed again. And on March 6th, Venus goes past. So here we have our conjunction listed over here in the little screenshot that I took of March 6th. We have this conjunction of Venus and Mars, 4.4 degrees. And so then Venus goes past. Interestingly enough, Venus is really high above the ecliptic. It's around 6 degrees above the ecliptic, and it's slowly coming back down toward the ecliptic. And even about 10 days later, there is a minimum separation between the two. And Venus is even closer on that date. It's around 3.9 degrees when there is a minimum separation after Venus goes by on the 16th of March. It's worth taking note of. So here, notice I have it on this chart, this screenshot here. Venus, Mars 3.9 minimum separation on March 16th. Venus then goes past its greatest elongation. But notice that the planets are still close together. But in the meantime, here comes Saturn. Saturn comes up and Venus goes past Saturn. And it's a grouping here, in particular with the moon is included here on March 28th. Interestingly enough, we have these three planets that are 5.3 degrees apart. And if you think about the planets, well, Venus goes past Saturn and Venus goes past Mars. Mars goes past Saturn, but it's pretty infrequent that you'll find these three planets this close together. And we're just going to include the moon in here because of its nice crescent shape and the Earth-shine effect. But on March 28th, we have this pretty rare grouping so close together of these three planets this close together within a 5.3 degree circle. Easily, the three planets can fit into a binocular field. The moon won't fit with all of them. It's too far away from the grouping. So we have this unusual grouping here of 5.3 degrees on the state. The reason they won't all fit, I think Saturn and Mars will fit with the moon, but Venus won't fit. The note I have over here is that the moon, Venus separation is 7.3 degrees. So you won't get that occurring in a typical binocular that has 6 degrees or 6.5 degrees. Like I use a pair of 750 binoculars and they're just a little bit over 7 degrees, 7.2 or something like that. This won't quite fit in my binocular field. So we have this rare, and it is a rare grouping. We talk about these rare things such as great conjunctions and so forth, but this is going to be a pretty rare grouping because the next time this occurs, that's this close, that these things are bunched up like this, interestingly enough, is about the time of the next great conjunction. When Saturn and Jupiter are getting back together again, early there in September of 2040, we have Mars and Venus and Saturn and Jupiter, and just per chance, Mercury has already set. So some time from now, we will have this little grouping. It's not necessarily a conjunction, but it's a little bunching or a group of three planets together, and they're 5.3 degrees apart. Easily binocular, easy something you can point out to the kids, and easily something to share with the neighbors. Hey, look, well, take a look at this and watch these planets all get together and do a dance out here in the morning sky. So this is something that is pretty rare in that regard. From that point, then we have Mars going past Saturn in early April. Venus is now taking off eastward. It's going pretty fast here. And notice we have it pointed out over here that this is a pretty close conjunction. Saturn and Mars, they are 0.4 degrees apart. So easily fit into a low power telescopic eyepiece where Mars and Saturn are together. Of course, this is occurring over in Capricornus. and Mars is pretty far away then from that rich star field of Jupiter, or of Taurus. So this is happening in Capricornus, where there are not very many bright stars in the eastern part of that constellation. April 24th, we have the moon come through. Notice that they're all moving here. Venus is moving faster than Mars. Mars is moving faster than Saturn, and they're starting to overtake Jupiter. On the 25th, it closes even farther. The moon comes through, makes more pretty morning scenes. Venus now is getting in there on his final approach to Jupiter. So the moon comes dancing through there in April past these three planets. Now, in the meantime, we have this pretty close conjunction of Neptune and Venus. It's within 30 arc minutes, half a degree. It's going to be difficult to see. It's going to be a challenge to see. This is happening in twilight. They're going to be quite low in the sky, but it's worth noting that this is one of Jean Mises. If you follow Jean Mises' books and his ideas about observing or what's going on in the sky with planets, this is one of his 25 closest conjunctions in a span of about 15 years. That in this early part of the century, to see Venus and Neptune together this close within a low power eyepiece on the morning of April 27th of this year. And so to get your actual field of view from your telescope, if you know your magnification and you know the apparent field of the eyepiece, you divide the two. So if I have a 50-degree apparent field eyepiece and a 100 magnification, I have a half-degree field. 50 divided by 100, 5/10, 1/2. So that will give me 30 arc minutes. This particular image shows no inversions. So this is just a straight screenshot out of Starry Night. Made a little template to indicate a circle and use a template within the program that gives me a half degree and work on that. So we have this, but this is coming up then. This is really close then to a very, very close Venus, Jupiter, what I call a proximate conjunction. People can make their own names up. I've made this one up. I call a proximate. They're in the same proximity. They're within 30 arc minutes or closer. So I call that a proximate conjunction. So we'll have Venus very, very close to Jupiter, within a half degree. We have Mars trailing behind, and we have Saturn way behind on this particular morning. So we have a nice, very close conjunction, easily spotted conjunction. Now, the next proximate conjunction will occur really during daytime. It'll be really, really close, but really challenging to see, very close to the sun. But the next proximate conjunction that's easy to spot will not be until 2034. So a close conjunction of Venus and Jupiter won't occur for another 12 years. This is a binocular field of view, like a 750 binocular, and it's going to be during bright twilight for this to occur. So the proximate conjunction or close conjunction of these two planets in May, let me go backwards for a sec, there we go. This is something to take note of, something to tell your neighbors, something to tell the community about, to be able to take a look at Jupiter and Saturn out there very, very close together, because a close one won't occur for about another 12 years. Roughly, theoretically, you could have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction once a year, depending upon some factors as when Venus might occur at greatest elongation compared to Jupiter and so on. But between now and 2034, the 2034 conjunction is the 11th one from now. So 12 years, about every year, the one in a few years is near the sun and will be a little more challenging, or really challenging to see. So April 30th, another one of those things to take a look at, and not until February this time. So May comes along now, and the moon's back again. But now notice that you don't have the planets in the same field of view. The boxes that I create are approximately 30 degrees from left to right. I try to use the same scale, unless I'm using a binocular or an eyepiece field of view. So the left to right, up and down, it's approximately 30 by 30, approximately. So now you can't get all the planets in the same location. And the moon comes by again on May 22nd. You can see it over here on the chart. Moon, and Saturn, 5.2 degrees apart on the 22nd of May, that moon right there. Notice that it's really not close to the Saturn line. It doesn't rise anywhere, or doesn't rise at the same time as Saturn if you go vertically. And this is one of those interesting effects that you really have to start looking at where the planets are and the moon is compared to the sky. You just can't use the chart by itself because it looks like the one on the previous day of May 21st might be the closer one, and it is not the closer one. And then we start to get the moon coming by the other bright planets, the 24th, 25th, 26th, and 27th, as Mars now approaches Jupiter for their conjunction in the morning sky. And that is shown over here on the chart on May 29th. Mars finally catches Jupiter, but now Venus is sort of leaving them all in the dust and really, really taking off as now Mars comes by Jupiter. And that is a relatively close conjunction of 0.6 degrees. They're both very close to the ecliptic at this time, and Mars goes past on this morning. It's interesting, I was looking at this and happened to accidentally run my computers stepping automatically. And I looked at these planets and I said, I'm going to show the attendees this evening what it would look like if we could speed up time. And these three planets, and as Jupiter finally enters the sky, to me almost looks like a firework exploding of these four planets getting close together and then sort of flying apart. It's not that way, but let's step this movie along and watch what occurs here with these planets as we go day by day. The moon comes through in March. There goes the planets past Saturn. Here comes Jupiter up there on the left. I didn't label it. Here comes the Venus, Jupiter. There comes April. Now Venus goes past Jupiter. Notice too here, I turned off the daylight. I turned off the twilight, and I put everything up a little bit higher in the sky. And so now we have Saturn moving past. There comes May, and we come to the end of the sequence. So these planets are close together, and they almost like they fly apart each morning. So I, again, must say to you that this is without daylight. This is without any kind of lighting effect. I put them a little bit higher in the sky so that it's possible to see this. Let's watch it one more time as they come into the sky here with Venus, Saturn, Mars, Saturn. You see how quickly Venus moves compared to the other planets. Here comes the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter. Saturn is kind of just slow poking it, following the stars, following this western migration. Here comes the Mars, Saturn. The moon goes past, and we get then to the end of May. So this period from March 15th to about May 31st is going to be pretty interesting as we watch. To me, it's pretty interesting to watch these planets go past each other and then quickly separate, particularly as Jupiter and Saturn just kind of follow the stars westward. They retrograde a little bit, but this show here as Venus takes off and Mars tries to chase it, seemingly, this occurs. In the morning sky, the next month, we have Venus and Mercury. Mercury makes a pretty poor morning appearance. And I turned off the daylight on this sequence too. This is just one chart showing all of the each day starting on June 23rd and moving down through July, August, where Venus and Mercury are moving through Taurus. Well, it's not always this easy to see because of the bright twilight, but we have this passing of Venus through Taurus, and here is what it was like. This is what it was like 2 years ago when Venus went through this region. It was not that dark, of course, and I do that, as I mentioned, just to show the starry background. But you add morning twilight in there, and you have a little bit of problem. Aldebaran is outlined here. If you look carefully, you can see the V of Taurus, and Venus is over here Venus was over here behind the trees. Oh, I'm sorry, Venus is here. I'm sorry, I thought I had the pointer the wrong direction. Venus is there as it goes through, as it went through Taurus, and the Pleiades up here. Luckily, from where I live, unluckily, I have some trees there, but luckily I have a notch in the trees where I can see Aldebaran come up. And if I stand in the right place and look through that notch, I can see Regulus come up as well. Not so lucky with certain other stars, but I am with that particular part of the sky. So here on, this was July 7th, 2 years ago. So we have Venus moving through Taurus during the summer months. Let's go the right direction. So here are some screenshots of the moon with Pleiades. The moon comes into view. That previous chart did not show anything with the moon. The moon is there on the 26th with Venus. And a binocular view of Venus with the Hyades and Aldebaran on the 1st of July. This is a tad earlier than in 2022 when Venus came through and went right seemingly through the Hyades on that particular morning. But that's worth a binocular view from Gamma Tauri down here to the right, Aldebaran, Epsilon Tauri here in the check mark. If you don't include Aldebaran, we have a check mark for Hyades.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Just my own quick question. Do all planets go through a retrograde period at some point?
Well, all the planets retrograde, seemingly the inferior planets too, because they're going faster than us to go from one part of the sky to the other side of the sky, to go from evening to morning. They are going westward compared to the ecliptic. Their ecliptic longitude is decreasing. It's decreasing to go from evening to morning. So technically they're retrograding, and compared to the stars, they retrograde. If you could see the starry background, well, the sun, they're going to retrograde compared to the sun. They go westward past the sun. So yes, Mercury and Venus retrograde as well. All things retrograde depend regardless of their location compared to Earth. Yeah, good question. The classic 9, I call them the classic 9 planets, are going to be visible from about the middle of June until the end of June. Now we have pretty long twilight in June, but it's worth this look, including the classic 9. I include Pluto. Historically, I include Pluto as a planet because historically it should be there. And if I may go to the side for a second aside, is that we have lots of things that are misnamed in astronomy. Like Big Bang is one of them. It was sort of a joking name from Fred Hoyle. Planetary nebula is not correct. And there are lots of other terms that are not correct. So historically, for the sake of history, I call this a classic 9 planets, including Pluto. So Pluto, Neptune, and I think Pluto's over here behind our video image. Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, Mars, Uranus, Venus, Mercury, and this is the 27th when the moon is near Mercury. It might need some help to locate it, but it is certainly worth this look. And it's going to be going on for a good period of time because the moon's going to be coming through there. The moon's going to be bouncing through past those planets from about the 14th all the way through here to about the 27th when it passes Mercury. I like to think that Mercury, the best night, the best morning is the 27th if you had an ideal observing clear sky and so on. But that is a good spot. And a good spot here locally, I think, to find this is I've had some success at May Watts School, if you're familiar with the school. It has a little hill there, sledding hill. It has a pretty good east horizon. And that's a pretty good place to go look for summertime planets because of the vantage point that you have that time of the year. So the classic 9 planets there are going to be visible to us from the middle to the end of June. So it's going to be an interesting display across the sky, roughly from the east-northeast to just past south where Pluto is. Going to be an interesting array. And so the planets are there. Some other effects as finally Mars gets into Taurus. A nice effect of binocular view of the Pleiades, the Moon, and Mars for late August. We have the giant planet oppositions again now where they are setting. This part of the chart shows setting. It's setting at sunrise, and so and they begin to set before sunrise after this point, and so these planets become now visible all night long, and then they start setting before sunrise as the year progresses. September 16th, we have the moon back with Mars in Taurus again as it comes through. This is in the south before sunrise. Interesting view. And then we get this other kind of opposition. I told you about the Mars-Venus opposition very briefly. In this opposition that occurs with Saturn and Venus and Jupiter is that these are the last dates that Venus shows up with the planets. So the planets in the sky, they're there for the classic 9 display in June. And now Venus is moving rapidly. And the line here, this 180-degree line that runs through from Earth, 180 degrees includes Venus and Saturn. Now Venus is moving so fast, it is moving away from that line and now disappears from view. Saturn, seeing it near the horizon, is sort of a challenge. It's not easily spotted, but the one with Jupiter is. You can almost see Jupiter and Venus almost together. Venus you can see at the horizon. Jupiter you can see almost at the horizon. And so almost to the date of the Venus-Jupiter opposition, you'll be able to see those two planets almost on one horizon and one on the other. Mercury comes into the sky in October, autumn mornings. It puts on a great display in the morning, October 8th. It's here near Beta Virginis, low in the sky, about 45 minutes before sunrise. Now the planets are here. In the morning, they're starting to disappear, except for Mars, for the most part. They're all setting before sunrise, and so we now have Mars as the last morning planet. And so the Moon is doing most of the activities here in November. December 7th, we're getting here near the end of the year. We have the Moon back with Mars. This is the morning. This is in the west-northwest, low in the sky. But I want to point out something that happens on that evening from December 7th into the next day. So this is the morning of December 7th. We have the Moon back here in Taurus with Mars. And that evening, particular evening, we have an occultation of Mars and the Moon that lasts for about an hour. On that evening, beginning just a little bit after 9 and lasting for approximately an hour. Mars goes behind the Moon, Moon covers Mars. We have a full moon that evening, and that's the opposition of Mars night. So 3 interesting things happening on the evening of December 7th and the morning of December 8th, but mainly there before midnight, we have this interesting occultation of Mars by the moon here in our area, a full moon, official full moon at 10 p.m. when it goes to its opposition with the sun, and Mars at opposition there as well. So some good viewing, some good things to look forward to on that particular night. Now, where can you find this? I've given you a lot, and there's a lot that I didn't have time to really look at. I have a summary of the morning sky. The summary of the morning sky is available at this URL, bit.ly, and yeah, I got the date, I got the year wrong, but it's the correct thing. Bit.ly 2020_AM_planets. That particular URL has a PDF that includes this chart and some of the charts I've used here, plus some other ones that allow you to follow this morning activity in the sky. And there's a lot more things that's included in that. Most of the important things occurring are summarized usually about 45 minutes before sunrise. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you my references. Oh, by the way, there's the morning chart is on the website, whenthecurveslineup.com. There's a little article there now that has that chart. There's not a lot going on, but it happens to be there. And I should list my references, and I appreciate Bob Victor, Robert Victor, expert sky watcher, for giving me some feedback about this morning chart and trying to squeeze as much into it as we could. So these are the references that I look at to find this out. So if you have any questions, I'd appreciate having them. That's the year. Quite active in the morning, not so active in the evening, but 2 times this year where you have a grouping of 5 bright planets, either in the morning in June or in the evening in December. Occurs about once every 2 years where you get 1, but we're going to get 2 this year. And that's going to be pretty fun to watch these planets group up. So your questions or otherwise, Jim, I think I'm turning this back to you. I appreciate your indulgence in my interests of sky watching, mainly to watch the planets' movements and where they happen to be. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jeff. And I don't see any questions at this time. Some comments, but oh, wait, hold on just a second. I do see some new things coming in here. So here is a question. How often is Mars occulted by the moon, and how often does that happen at opposition?
Well, I've not looked at the question about opposition. I can look at that. It's probably pretty infrequent, but there are Mars-Moon occultations every year. We just don't happen to see them. But that's a question I can look for and find a way to get back to all of you, or put the answer on your Facebook page. And so the question I have is a Mars-Moon opposition occultation. Well, that one's probably going to run off in the future. But we'll take a look and see when that might occur. Good question. Don't have an answer right now.
Just double check again here. At this time, again, a couple comments. A very nice presentation, but I do not see any other questions at this time. So, Jim, I guess I will turn it back over to you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
I think that is all we have tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, next month we'll be virtual again. We'll be virtual on the 18th, and then we're trying to figure out when we can meet back in person. But hopefully that'll be sometime soon. Thank you, and you all have a good night and keep looking up.